Hi, I'm Kirk Geller with Gaming America. Today I'm here with the California Nation's Indian Gaming Association Chairman James Siva. How are you today, Chairman Siva?
I'm a little tired. It's been a long week, but it's been a really, really great week. A lot of great sessions here, a lot of great vendors out on the trade show floor, a lot of great meetings. So it's been a wonderful conference as always. And, they really went above and beyond for the 40th anniversary of this trade show. So it's been an amazing week, just very long.
Of course, and speaking on that tired, I attended one of your panels where you said that prediction markets were the greatest threat to Indian gaming currently. Would you mind delving into that a bit further?
Absolutely. So this is a brand new issue that's just popped up. The first time we even heard of it was, right before Christmas when this came out. I don't think it's a coincidence that they dropped it literally on December 23rd. But just to bring everybody up to speed, because I've had to do a crash course on this because this is outside of our normal kind of realm of operation. So prediction markets. There's a company named Kalshi who is looking to move sports betting onto the Commodities Future Trading Commission underneath their regulatory authority, essentially taking something that's dictated as an event market and now they're moving it into the prediction markets. If they're allowed to do this, this would not only preempt tribal gaming exclusivity, tribal sovereignty, but also state law, state rights. So this is a major issue for not just tribes, but states, any other, area who is either pro-gaming, anti-gaming. You could have online sports betting there tomorrow if this is allowed to go through. And for us here in California, we've worked the last 4 years on sports betting, on what that could potentially look like. Spent hundreds of millions of dollars, so much political power, effort, time, and all of that could potentially be for naught with this new threat that has seemingly come out of nowhere. But as we move forward, we will have our moment in the sun, I'll say. We have a roundtable in front of the commission, in front of CFTC at the end of April, on April 30th. We're hopeful we get a positive response out of there, but we are also already working on some backup plans, a political strategy, getting some of the members of the Senate to weigh in, reaching out to different congressmen that can support this, reaching out to AGs in states that are strictly anti-gaming, states like Utah, like Texas, like Hawaii, who fundamentally oppose any forms of gaming, and now they could have it in their backyard too. And so this is a wide-reaching threat, and we're really trying to do our best at bringing as many people into the room, spreading the information. CNIGA has been kind of leading the organizing effort along with IGA, along with Oklahoma Indian Gaming, to bring these people in, to really go and give as wide representation for all of Indian countries we possibly can.
And if that roundtable were to go in a negative way, what would be the plan of action for CNIGA?
So for us here in California, I think the first immediate reaction would be to file a lawsuit in some form or another, and then also continue on the political advocacy as well. Interestingly enough, CFTC, their group that oversees them is the Senate Agricultural Committee, because that's what they are used to doing. Like commodities, future trading are usually an agricultural component. So we know a lot of those senators, so that's who we've been contacting immediately. And if this goes our way, that's who we'll continue to reach out to. And I think something that's not getting talked about enough is the connection to the current administration with this whole Kalshi predictive markets, because you can't get away from the fact that Donald Trump Jr. is on their board of directors. And we've seen the speed at which this administration will move with executive orders, and they are forcing things into court. They already said, we know we're not going to question the legality of this or who it affects. We'll see what the court says. And I think that's their strategy on this one too. And unfortunately, Indian country isn't built to respond at that speed. We have various levels that we have to go through, educating our tribal leaders, going back and talking to our membership to see if we can even have the authority to do this. Indian country, as big and as wide we are, is also very small, but we also are full of our own levels of bureaucracy. And it gets complicated to move quickly, but we've had to really try to rethink how we got to approach this and the speed in which we have to engage with them.
Of course, and you mentioned sports betting. I was wondering, coming off events such as the Super Bowl and March Madness, which obviously generate millions in handle, is there added motivation felt from tribes to bring a regulated sports betting market to California?
Yes and no. Yes, I used to say, if sports betting comes to California, now I've reframed my, most of my speeches where it's not an if, it's a when. When does it come here? How does it come here? The one thing that we are firmly holding to as a principle is that no matter what sports betting looks like, it has to be led by tribes, has to be controlled by tribes. Tribes are the operators in California, period. And we want to make sure that continues to be the truth. We do envision sports betting coming into California. How that happens is a complicated issue, especially here in California, where we have the initiative process, where we have to go through that process of gathering signatures, getting it out in front of the voters to amend the Constitution to be able to bring in a new form of gaming. And that's a complicated process. And right now, voters have a lot of negative sentiment out there. We've seen it in the last election. We've seen it in the previous election. So we're very cognizant of moving forward with, holding our principles close to our chest, but also realizing that we have to be realistic in what the voter would respond to. And you can only go back to the well so many times. We had Prop 26 and 27 a few years ago. Decisive defeats. And we've continued, the outreach, the polling, which is so important because we're trying to make these decisions based on actual real data. And right now for the upcoming election cycle, it's not there. The voters aren't there for this, no matter who it is. If it's commercially led, if it's tribally led, they're just not ready for it here in California. And so for us, it's about choosing where we can put our kind of political strength or political power at the right place at the right time. And right now is just frankly not the right time.
Absolutely. And with these verticals popping up seemingly every month, whether it be DFS, sweepstakes, prediction markets, how does someone such as yourself always remain ahead, in terms of information and what's best to do for tribes?
For me, I try to reach out to people who are subject experts in those areas. So with sports betting, it's been a number of years, so I've gathered, a bit of knowledge on that issue. Sweepstakes, similar, but with, prediction markets, I've really been fortunate to work with people like Dan Orloff, who represents Chicken Ranch and owns Ventnos, which is a somewhat of a sports betting company where they're doing Class 2 online on premise. But Dan has a lot of expertise with CFTC. He actually helped open the New Jersey sports betting market, so he understands a lot of these elements. Because I've been trying to learn CFTC speech, if you can, because they have no idea what tribal sovereignty is. And frankly, they don't care what tribal sovereignty is. So when we go in there and advocate for ourselves, we have to be able to speak their language. We have to go in there and talk about why sports betting are event markets and not prediction markets, and speak to the issues with liability and where that ends and where that stops, and use their own terms to get them to understand why these rules that they're proposing are fundamentally incorrect from their perspective, from their rules. But again, it's a lot of education and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of, doing deep dives into, online platforms and long phone calls and Zoom calls and all of these things. It can be really complicated. And, at the end of the day, as a tribal leader, like my main focus is running our tribal government back home, taking care of our tribal citizens. But these are direct threats to them. We always talk about 7 generations. If we can't get a handle of this now, we might not have the same industry that we've been able to build up in 2 generations, let alone 7. So again, it's just, a lot of education, a lot of outreach, and it's a lot to ask for any tribal leader.
Of course, sir. And we thank you for joining us here today. With Gaming America, I've been Kirk Geller.